During the Second World War, the American military faced a catastrophic problem that had absolutely nothing to do with enemy fire or tactical disadvantages. It was sheer psychological collapse. Pilots, infantrymen, and commanders were experiencing severe combat fatigue, operating in environments where the absolute baseline state of existence was sheer, unadulterated terror. In response to this crisis, military researchers developed a psychological technique that allowed soldiers to fall asleep within 2 minutes under extreme combat conditions, even with artillery detonating in the background. That technique, heavily reliant on physical relaxation and mental visualization, is still taught in elite military academies today. But there is a secondary detail from those early classified studies that almost no one discusses. The same research program that studied how men fall asleep also studied the exact fraction of a second when they wake up. Researchers noticed a strange, highly consistent anomaly. Soldiers who managed to consciously control the very first seconds of their awareness upon waking showed a massive, mathematically significant reduction in combat stress symptoms. Their neurological baseline was completely different from those who woke up in a sudden, reactive panic. They were harder to startle. Their decision-making under fire was sharper. Their emotional regulation was profoundly stabilized. Here is the core idea. The first 5 seconds after you open your eyes are not just a passive transition between sleeping and waking. They are a profound neurological vulnerability. During this microscopic window of time, your brain's protective filters, your psychological defenses, and your analytical boundaries are entirely offline. Whoever or whatever claims those first 5 seconds dictates your neurochemistry, your emotional regulation, and your behavioral trajectory for the rest of the entire day. To understand exactly why this happens,
we must define the architecture of the human brain during this specific moment. Scientists, neurologists, and sleep researchers call this the hypnopompic state. The hypnopompic state means the narrow, highly volatile neurological window between sleep and full wakefulness, characterized by the lingering presence of theta brainwaves before the conscious ego fully reassembles itself. In the 1960s, sleep researchers at Stanford University began to look closely at this exact transition. What they found changed our fundamental understanding of human consciousness. When you are awake, active, and navigating your day, your brain produces beta waves, fast, erratic, highly engaged frequencies suited for problem solving, active thinking, and stress management. When you close your eyes and relax, you drop into alpha waves. When you are in the deepest, most restorative phases of dreamless sleep, your brain operates on delta waves. But when you are in the hypnopompic state, caught perfectly on the borderland between dreaming and waking, your brain is saturated with theta waves. Theta is a very specific, highly documented frequency, measuring between 4 and 8 hertz. It is the frequency associated with deep states of clinical hypnosis, profound meditation, the processing of subconscious trauma, and extreme neuroplasticity. When your brain is bathing in theta waves, the iron gate between your conscious, analytical mind and your deeply rooted subconscious programming is wide open. Your rational filters have not activated yet. Your default mode network, the complex network in your brain responsible for your ego, your self-critical inner voice, and your habitual thought patterns, has simply not booted up yet. You are, for a brief, fleeting moment, neurologically naked. People who survive traumatic, life-threatening events like catastrophic car accidents or plane crashes almost always describe a psychological phenomenon called time dilation.
Seconds suddenly stretch into minutes. The brain, faced with an overwhelming terminal situation, drops its normal processing filters. It abandons its usual energy-saving shortcuts and enters a state of total, absolute clarity to maximize the chances of survival. Every detail in the environment sharpens. Every sound separates into distinct channels. The mind becomes fully open, recording environmental data at an astonishing, hyper-vigilant rate. But what if that state of unfiltered, absolute awareness is not just reserved for life or death emergencies? What if your brain enters a micro-variation of that exact mode every single morning for a few seconds, the moment you open your eyes? What if that clarity, that raw, unconditioned awareness, is offered to you daily, but you have been conditioned by the modern world to miss it your entire life? This observation of the waking window is not a modern technological discovery. It is documented in historical sources separated by nearly 2,000 years, describing the exact same human phenomenon in remarkably similar terms. If we examine ancient philosophical, psychological, and Gnostic texts, like the Gospel of Philip, written over 1,600 years ago, we find precise descriptions of the threshold between sleep and waking. The text describes it as the moment when the core self is uncovered, not protected, not hidden by the ego, but fully exposed. While the language of the ancient world was naturally metaphorical, using terms of theology and myth, the underlying psychological observation is absolutely identical to modern neuroscience. There is a gap between sleep and waking, where something fundamental about your psychology is exposed, open, and highly reachable. The human brain has a window. It opens every morning. It stays open for roughly 5 to 7 seconds. And what happens in those 5 seconds determines the chemical and psychological trajectory of your entire day. Think about the architecture of a normal morning in the modern world. You wake up, and almost immediately, before your eyes have even focused on the ceiling, a heavy feeling settles into your chest. Before you have even formed a complete, coherent thought, there is a sense of dread, a vague anxiety, or a rush of absolute urgency. You start replaying your problems. You think about your financial stress, the emails you avoided yesterday, your unresolved interpersonal conflicts, the crushing weight of your daily obligations. You assume this is just what waking up feels like for an adult. You assume this heaviness is normal. You assume it is just who you are. It is not normal. It is a biological hijack. Let me explain the exact evolutionary mechanics of what is actually happening in your brain and your body. When you are in deep sleep, your conscious mind is entirely offline. Your ego, your worries, your fears, your social identity, none of it is running. Your identity is temporarily dissolved. Because you are not actively worrying, your adrenal glands are not generating the stress hormones that fuel anxiety. You are existing in a state of pure biological restoration. Then you wake up. The transition begins. In those first few seconds, your consciousness returns, but your psychological filters have not yet reassembled. For roughly 3 to 7 seconds, depending on your neurobiology, you are conscious but unconditioned. You are aware but unfiltered. You are present but unprogrammed. Think of your consciousness in that moment like an analog radio. All night long, the radio was turned off. There was no signal, no static, no external noise. Now, the radio is turned on for just a few seconds before any specific station locks in. There is pure reception. Every frequency is available. Your baseline consciousness is broadcasting on a frequency of pure, undisturbed stillness.
But in those same few seconds, your brain's evolutionary survival mechanism recognizes that the system is back online. It realizes it is no longer protected by the physical paralysis of sleep. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, waking up in the ancestral environment was dangerous. You had to instantly scan for predators. So the brain immediately boots up the default mode network to scan the environment for threats. It floods your system with a massive spike of cortisol, phenomenon known in the medical and psychological literature as the cortisol awakening response. In the ancestral world, that cortisol spike gave you the energy to run from a saber-toothed tiger. But the modern world has weaponized this specific biological response. Our entire environment is meticulously structured to exploit this 5-second window. It is not a conspiracy, it is a business model. The largest tech conglomerates in the world employ behavioral neurologists for a reason. They understand the hypnopompic state perfectly. Your smartphone sits on your nightstand, physically inches from your head. Notifications from social media, emails from your boss, and breaking news alerts wait for you in the dark. The news cycle is algorithmically optimized to trigger outrage, fear, and anxiety before your feet even touch the floor. Every element of the modern morning routine is engineered to fill those 5 seconds with high-stress stimuli before you can consciously claim them for yourself. Ancient philosophical texts often warned of invisible forces that feed on low-frequency human states. They warned of conceptual entities that thrive on fear, anxiety, anger, and systemic confusion. They called these forces archons. Today, in the 21st century, we do not need mythology, demons, or superstition to understand this exact concept. The archons of the modern world are simply the psychological loops of chronic anxiety. They are the endless, self-critical chatter of the default mode network.
They are the external corporate algorithms designed by neuroscientists to capture your attention, harvest your emotional reactivity, and literally monetize your physiological stress. They thrive on your nervous system being perpetually locked in a constant state of fight or flight. And on the flip side, these same ancient texts spoke of something called the monad, absolute source, the quiet, undisturbed core of original consciousness. In modern neurobiology, we call this your baseline state of parasympathetic nervous system regulation. It is the state of physiological coherence, where your heart rhythms and your brain waves are highly synchronized. It is the state where you operate from a place of profound clarity, objective observation, and deep intuition, rather than blind animalistic emotional reactivity. The system around you, the multi-billion-dollar attention economy, the fast-paced culture of endless productivity, the constant digital connectivity, has been engineered to make sure you never realize this 5-second hypnopompic window exists. Because a person who controls the first 5 seconds of their consciousness every morning becomes fundamentally harder to manipulate. A person deeply grounded in their parasympathetic baseline does not react blindly to algorithmic outrage on social media. They do not consume products mindlessly out of a manufactured sense of lack, insecurity, or stress. They become psychologically autonomous. And psychological autonomy, the ability to regulate your own internal state regardless of external chaos, is the single greatest threat to an economic system built entirely on your constant, low-grade anxiety. So, the critical, life-altering question becomes, how do you reclaim this window? How do you intercept the cortisol awakening response before it defines your entire day? It is not about reciting a magical chant to the universe. It does not require years of monastic training in isolation. It is a precise, targeted, scientifically valid neurobiological intervention designed specifically for the first 5 seconds after opening your eyes. It works through three specific, measurable mechanisms.
Mechanism number 1, attentional anchoring and somatic disruption. When your eyes open in the morning, your natural conditioned instinct is to let your attention immediately rush up into your head. You immediately look for your thoughts, your worries, and your mental chatter. You look for your identity and your problems to remember who you are. Instead, the moment you wake, before the first thought fully forms, you must physically and deliberately shift your attention away from your brain and down into your body. Specifically, place your hand flat on the center of your chest. Feel the physical warmth of your skin. Feel the mechanical, rhythmic beating of your heart underneath your palm. Focus your entire cognitive bandwidth on that physical sensation. By placing your attention firmly on your somatic experience, your physical body, before your analytical mind fully activates, you lock the door that anxiety uses to enter. The heart is the strongest electromagnetic generator in the human body, producing a field exponentially larger than the brain. Shifting your focus to the heart center prevents the default mode network from immediately hijacking your waking state. You are grounding your consciousness in the physical present rather than the psychological anxious future. Mechanism number 2, emotional resonance and vagal tone modulation. If you try to think your way into a good morning, if you try to force positive thoughts, analyze your schedule, or repeat empty mental affirmations, you are using the exact cognitive channel that anxiety monitors. Thinking requires the analytical mind. It requires the prefrontal cortex, which is intimately tied to your stress responses and your ego. Instead of thinking, you must bypass the cognitive channel entirely. With your hand on your chest, feeling your heartbeat, you generate a feeling. You generate a profound sense of stillness, presence, and absolute autonomy. You do not speak words out loud. You simply project a physical sensation of being completely grounded in your own body. When you do this, you send a powerful, non-verbal electrical signal down your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, known as cranial nerve 10, is the biological superhighway connecting your brain to your major organs, including your heart and your gut. By intentionally feeling a sense of safety and presence, you are telling your neurobiology to tune to the baseline frequency of calm rather than the static of the anxious outside world. You are manually establishing heart-brain coherence, drastically improving your heart rate variability before the cortisol rush can take over. Mechanism number 3, the deliberate interruption of the cortisol awakening response and the leveraging of neuroplasticity. By holding this physical and emotional anchor for just 5 seconds, while your brain is still in the highly plastic, programmable theta wave state, you actively interrupt the automatic flood of morning stress hormones. You are sending a direct, biological signal to your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. You are explicitly telling it that there is no immediate danger. There is no predator. There is no emergency requiring a stress response. This simple, 5-second action forces your nervous system to boot up in a parasympathetic state, characterized by rest, digestion, cellular repair, and cognitive clarity, rather than a sympathetic state of panic, fight, or flight. You are manually overriding your evolutionary alarm clock. So, what exactly changes in your life when you actually apply this protocol consistently? What are the observable, measurable effects? The first morning you do this, you will notice an immediate, undeniable absence. The heavy weight of morning dread will not land on your chest. That automatic anxiety, that familiar gray fog that normally greets you, will simply fail to trigger. Because you manually interrupted the chemical release of cortisol during the hypnopompic window, the physical sensation of stress will not be there. In its place, you will feel a surprising sense of neurological space. You will feel an emptiness that is not depressing, but liberating. It will feel as if the morning has room in it that was simply never there before. By the third or fourth morning of executing this protocol, you will experience a distinct cognitive shift. Your first thoughts, arriving after the 5-second window has closed, will be remarkably cleaner. Instead of the usual chaotic mental noise, you will find clarity arriving on its own. You will find yourself remembering solutions to complex problems rather than just blindly worrying about the problems themselves. Within the first week, your overall energy levels will shift in a way you can physically measure. You will have a noticeably higher threshold for stress throughout the afternoon. Your focus will hold longer. Interactions with difficult people, demanding clients, or complex tasks will feel substantially less draining. Why? Because your nervous system was calibrated to a state of coherence before the world had a chance to contaminate it. You did not start your day in a biological, hormonal deficit. You scrubbed your consciousness clean for the day, and a clean psychological field operates with maximum metabolic efficiency. Over months, this leverages a foundational law of neuroscience known as Hebbian theory. Neurons that fire together, wire together. By repeatedly choosing coherence over panic in the theta state, you are literally rewiring the neural pathways of your brain. You are building a new default baseline. Now we must establish a clear, non-negotiable boundary. This 5-second hypnopompic protocol is not a magical cure-all for deep clinical trauma, chronic clinical depression, or severe neurological disorders. It will not magically solve complex life problems.
It will not pay your bills, fix your broken relationships, or instantly rewrite decades of deep psychological conditioning. It is simply a biological tool. It is a scientifically grounded mechanism to stop the unconscious hemorrhage of your mental and emotional energy before your day even begins. It is about claiming the foundational territory of your mind. It is about taking back the steering wheel before the vehicle starts moving. The window opens every single morning. The neurochemistry is sitting there, waiting to be directed. For your entire life, the algorithms, the stress loops, the news cycles, and the modern world's engineered noise have spoken first. They have claimed those 5 seconds because you did not know they were yours to claim. Tomorrow morning, when your eyes open, the theta waves will be flowing. The filters will be down. The gap between your conscious and subconscious mind will be wide open. Who will claim those 5 seconds? If this breakdown of the brain's waking mechanics and the architecture of morning anxiety gave you a new perspective on your own mind, I want you to analyze your own baseline. Let me know in the comments, what is the very first, unfiltered emotion you usually feel the exact moment you wake up? Is it dread? Is it rushing? Is it numbness? Identify it. Because identifying the baseline is the first necessary step to dismantling it.